Welcome to our second Madrid Energy Conference curtain raiser interview for 2024. My name is Jeremy Martin, Vice President for Energy Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas. And together with our partners at IPD Latin America, we are delighted to mark the conference's fifth anniversary this year on April 9th through 11th in Madrid, Spain. And in a bit of a twist for our curtain raiser interviews, we're pleased to speak with two executives from Excelerate Energy today. Excelerate's a global LNG infrastructure company based in the Houston area, offering a full range of flexible regasification services from FSRUs to infrastructure development to LNG supply. And as I mentioned, we have two executives joining us today, Gabriela Aguilar, who's the Vice President for Latin America and General Manager for Argentina and Brazil. Gabby, great to see you.
Great to see you, Jeremy. It's my pleasure to be here.
Sorry we'll miss you this year. You were a wonderful panelist last year, but we'll share all the details after. I know you have important business meetings to attend to, I think even in Houston maybe. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
And Derek Wong is Vice President for Government Relations and Public Affairs at Excelerate. Derek's our other Excelerate executive joining us today on the curtain raiser. Derek, you will join us in Madrid on the panel. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you there. But welcome to the welcome to the curtain raiser today.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Really looking forward to the Madrid Energy Conference and for our conversation today.
I also want to mention that Excelerate Energy is a member of the Institute of the Americas Energy Steering Committee. So thank you all, both of you, very active in that steering committee. So appreciate your support on that. Derek, you have more the global remit, if you will, at Excelerate. So why don't we go sort of global and then narrowly go down to sort of country specific in the course of this interview today. And I'd like to start discussion on global insights with you, and perhaps you could share where we are, a little bit background context on global gas markets in LNG. And of course, there was this big conference in Houston last week known as CERAWeek that maybe you can include in some of your opening comments, insights you gleaned from CERAWeek on the issues of global gas markets and LNG.
Sure, thanks, Jeremy. You're right. A large chunk of the energy industry was gathered here in Houston last week. We also had heads of state, energy ministers, and different industry thought leaders that were here to share ideas and really talk about the multidimensional nature of the energy transition. And I think that's where natural gas really plays a fundamental role globally, helping meet energy security needs, helping countries decarbonize and meet their own energy transition goals, and providing access to energy and electrification for people who need that access around the world. And so there are a lot of debates around global demand. We see that it's going to be increasing for energy, and particularly for gas in certain regions. There's a lot of talk about data centers and the future of AI, and the fact that, they were called energy caterpillars just by how much they consume. And so the need for secure, flexible, affordable energy really points to gas as a fundamental part of the energy mix. And so if we look at particularly LNG, liquefied natural gas, global trade in LNG hit about 400 million tons in 2023. We do expect that to continue to increase. And that means that LNG suppliers globally also need to be able to continue their production. There are some projects in the pipeline that need to get fully financed, fully permitted. And so there was also discussion around permitting reform. There was obviously the announcement from the White House about a temporary pause in LNG export permits for non-FTA countries. And so that was a subject of discussion. Sure. And about if the U.S. is not able to fulfill its role for partners and allies around the world, who will step up? And obviously there are other LNG suppliers out there in the Middle East, in Australia, and perhaps in Latin America that could fill some of the gap. But there was also a sense of optimism that we're in election season in the U.S. There are several other countries around the world that either have had democratic elections this year or will go to the polls. And so elections have consequences around policy, and we'll see how things land after those elections play out. But certainly a very fundamental role of natural gas in this panorama.
No, thank you for that context. And I think that's a perfect segue. And you mentioned the administration's review of the United States export permits to non-FTA countries, non-free trade agreement countries. I imagine that was a heavily discussed topic at CERAWeek for sure. And it's a nice segue to sort of what I would say is something I want to talk to you both about, sort of geopolitics. And you mentioned energy transition. In fact, we launched the Madrid Energy Conference 5 years ago with a clear focus on how Europe and Latin America, sort of that nexus, can collaborate on matters around the energy transition. And I would say in that conversation over the last 5 years, what we've also seen is the reemergence. Obviously, the Ukraine invasion is a principal driver of this, but sort of energy security and sort of that trilemma that you implicitly mentioned has certainly returned as a key focal point. So maybe let's talk now about geopolitics of LNG, and particularly in terms of energy security, and that affordability, reliability, and guarantee supply to make sure modern economies can function, and that nexus of Latin America and Europe, and the emphasis on the role for the Western Hemisphere in Latin America supply. I know I want you both to comment on this, but Derek, let's keep with our sort of big picture, and then we'll ask Gabby to comment on Latin America.
Sure, Jeremy, happy to get us started. And you mentioned the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. I think that launched a rethinking, a reorganization around global gas trade, particularly pipeline gas that was coming directly from Russia into Europe, a large demand center that doesn't have a lot of domestic production. And so there was a very specific decision that was made in Brussels and in a number of European capitals about supply diversification, and basically saying if Russian pipeline gas is not reliable for us, we need to turn to other sources, and global LNG is one of those. There was also an idea of bringing down consumption and ramping up renewables, but in our space, really looking at how we could help Europe build the LNG infrastructure it needed to be able to replace some of those molecules that were previously coming through pipeline from Russia. And so from Excelerate, we have a fleet of FSRUs, floating storage and regasification units, and these serve as flexible floating LNG import terminals. And two of our FSRUs, in the wake of Russia's invasion, were deployed to countries in Europe, one in Finland and one in Germany. And I take Finland as a really interesting example because in May of 2022, just a few months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Finland made a couple of really important decisions. One, they decided to join NATO after decades of neutrality. Two, they decided we're going to take some steps to be able to really have energy independence from Russia, and they signed a long-term contract with Excelerate for us to charter our FSRU to the port of Inku. And what also happened that same week in May was that Gazprom shut off their gas supplies to Finland. And so that just shows sort of the real impact of geopolitics on energy markets, and how private sector came together working with some of our colleagues in the public sector to come up with a response to this existential threat. Similarly, in Germany, there was 55 billion cubic meters flowing through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline that first was sort of cut off, and then there was a disruption to the pipeline. And in the intervening period, the German government has gone out and basically chartered 6 FSRUs. And if you think about an FSRU having an import capacity of around 5 BCM, that doesn't fully replace what was coming in through Nord Stream, but it does help provide that supply diversification. And so that's the infrastructure side. The molecule side, as you were referring to, Jeremy, that can come from anywhere in the global LNG markets. Obviously, the U.S. and Gulf Coast LNG is coming across the Atlantic, is landing in ports in Europe. But there's also LNG that's coming from the Middle East, from Qatar, from the UAE. And I think a nice thought to this as we go into Madrid is what role could Latin America play as a potential supplier, as a producer of gas and LNG?
Well, perfect segue, and thanks to geopolitics, the Finland example is excellent. I mean, that's a great example of just exactly sort of the last couple of years and what we've seen, the paradigm shift, if you will. For sure, I think this question of where Latin America fits is exactly where I'd like to try and bring Gabriela in. And I would just preface sort of, I want to end talking about Argentina specifically, but maybe Gabby starting a little more broadly on Latin America in general terms. And then we could, like I said, end with Argentina specifically. But take us into sort of geopolitics of gas and LNG in Latin America writ large.
I think that today we hear a lot about the energy trilemma and energy security, but the truth is that the region, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile were really early birds in adopting these flexible solutions and about importing LNG to secure energy resources to their countries for different reasons, because each country has a different profile, energy profile. Chile is different from Brazil and from Argentina. But at some point in the early 2000s, Chile developed 2 import terminals. Brazil started with 1 import terminal and today has 8 LNG import terminals. Argentina, 2, one of them is seasonal. So what it's a way to see is that the LATAM, despite the fact of having hydrocarbons resources, large hydrocarbons resources, that even as Vaca Muerta, Brazil, offshore, Bolivia, they still need reliability, flexibility to account and to fulfill their energy needs. No? In the case of Brazil, due to the hydro power, they need a base load to renewables as well. Argentina needs additional peaks of gas supplies to cope with the winter supply, to the winter needs, and Chile doesn't have hydrocarbons. So for different reasons, LATAM needed to have additional resources of natural gas. Today, the situation in some way is changing. When Bolivia was the hub and the supplier of natural gas to Brazil and to Argentina for the last 30 years, they are in the process of a declination of their gas reserves and production. So there is an opportunity in first place, Argentina to become a reliable source of supply for Chile and for Brazil, making use of the idle infrastructure. And at the same token, it doesn't mean that the import terminals of LNG will resolve in some way all their energy needs. I think that today what we see in the region is, and based on the experience from the world, what Derek was explaining, is that there's not only one source of supply that the countries will want to rely from now on. They want to have to benchmark about suppliers. They want to benchmark about reliability, wants to research about flexibility and pricing. And there is a pricing arbitrage opportunity, Atlantic, Pacific, and to multi-use opportunities of the different terminals in the region.
It's such a fascinating, and thank you, it's such a fascinating discussion. You talk about the 30-year evolution in terms of really the pioneering Bolivia to Brazil gas pipeline that really sort of launched particularly Bolivia's position as an energy hub, a natural gas hub, but now to where we are today and where Excelerate fits in with this question of flexibility and why are there import terminals in Brazil and Argentina? And you've discussed exactly this question around flexibility and reliability. And I think it's so interesting. The question about idled infrastructure and idled assets around natural gas is something that we're looking at, and we'll share a little bit more in the Madrid Energy Conference based upon this report that the Institute of the Americas has been doing for CAF, the Development Bank, because I think there's still a major role for gas to decarbonize some of the still fossil fuel-based generation, or I should say dirtier fuel oil, diesel, coal, power generation in the region that could be with a little more investment in infrastructure, gasified, and even in industrial processes. So I think this question of gas can also be part of the decarbonization conversation, at least in the near term. Yes, we have to be cognizant of methane and stranded assets, medium, long term, but certainly, as you've outlined, the role of gas and flexibility and energy security. Let's end with Argentina. You're based in Argentina. You're the general manager, country chair for Excelerate in Argentina. You've been working on a lot of these flexible solutions. But I want to talk about where Argentina can fit in the global market because, yes, the seasonality demands imports, but there's a new government, and the new government's brought a lot of attention to just fixing the macroeconomic situation and the country risk question, which then leads to, can Argentina become not just a regional supplier of gas and energy security, but globally? So talk a little bit about just that, Argentina's natural gas, you mentioned Vaca Muerta already, but particularly this opportunity to be part of the global LNG market.
I think that there is a unique opportunity for Argentina to develop its hydrocarbon resources. It has the second largest gas and oil reserves of shale in the world. So there is a window of opportunity that Argentina could take and to sell massively and develop and sell their resources to the world. On the other hand, as you said, the Argentina needs to define a strategy from the regulatory, legal, tax perspective in order to give a platform to develop projects, liquefaction projects, and oil exports infrastructure that could secure that infrastructure and to repay those large investments that needs to be required to develop these opportunities. At the same token, it doesn't mean that Argentina, could become a large exporter of oil and gas, but particularly on gas, considering what the world is looking for, now flexible and secure energy. But on the other hand, doesn't mean that the importation of LNG that will have a second opportunity or will be left aside. On the contrary, we see that there's an opportunity to balance the export of natural gas and at the same point to continue being an importer of natural gas, of LNG, and to cope with and to reach the sustainability targets. And in the case of, for instance, an Excelerate, which is an interesting thing, it's to balance the natural gas demand. We have Excelerate has been in the region since 2008 in Argentina with 2 terminals, in Brazil since 2012 with 2 terminals. And Brazil also at the moment were importing gas from Bolivia, but when Brazil needed to have sources of reliable sources of supply, they trusted on Excelerate. Why I'm saying this? Because one of our operations is in Bahia de Guanabara Bay. The other one is in Salvador. And we delivered a new vessel, a new FSRU, 1 week before the World Cup. So Brazil, when needed, the reliability about a huge event relied on Excelerate Energy. And then 2 hours after, relied on Excelerate to give energy security in times of when the Olympics happened in Brazil. What I'm trying to say here is that Argentina has a very important opportunity to sell gas to Brazil, making use of the other infrastructure and maybe with the construction of a new pipeline connecting the south of Brazil. But at the same token, if there are all the regulatory framework, legal framework, and tax conditions on the long term to give support and to give reliability to those large investments and investors to develop this infrastructure and to make it happen and sell gas to the world.
I think it's the gas pipeline, the idle infrastructure. I think there's so many follow-up questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I did want to mention that Argentina's Deputy Secretary of Energy, Mariela Beljanski, will join us in Madrid. She'll be speaking, specifically about energy transition goals and objectives, but also what's going on, because speaking of regulatory and legal and financial issues, there is a tariff adjustment, there's public hearings, there are tariff adjustments with regards to gas in particular Buenos Aires. So we'll get some updates from the Deputy Secretary in Madrid. And then the final thing I think that's remarkable, again, back to the nexus and why we convene Madrid Energy Conference, In the MOU between Argentina and the EU, natural gas is specified. So it is specified as an area of collaboration, EU-Argentina. So I think that's something, again, then back to Derek's points of sort of the geopolitics post-Ukraine, right, and the Russian situation in terms of supply. So always so much to talk about. We'll have to leave it there. Gabby, we'll see you again, hopefully soon. Derek, we will see you in Madrid.
Yep, lots to discuss there. See you then.
Thank you both, Gabby, Gabriela Aguilar, Derek Wong from Excelerate Energy. We sincerely appreciate your comments. The Madrid Energy Conference, April 9 through 11 in Madrid, Spain, the Meliá Serrano, www.madridenergyconference.com. See you there.